Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Stenner, Community Engagement Specialist for Durham Region for Metrolinx. It is my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's event. On behalf of Metrolinx, I'd like to welcome everyone viewing online to this evening's information session focused on the Durham-Scarborough Bus Rapid Transit project in the city of Oshawa. Metrolinx is committed to engaging with and informing our neighbors, customers, and the community about our progress as we move forward with planning, building, and operating the region's transit network. We invite all feedback regarding our services and our projects, and I want to thank you again for your interest in joining us here this evening. Please note that this event is being closed captioned. To use this feature, please enable it on your video player. As we begin, I'd like to take a moment for a land acknowledgement. Metrolinx wishes to recognize that it operates on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. In particular, we acknowledge that the Durham-Scarborough Bus Rapid Transit project traverses both Treaty 13 territory with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Williams Treaties territory, specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on these lands and has a responsibility to work with the original keepers of this territory and the many diverse Indigenous peoples living here today. Metrolinx remains committed to engaging with the Indigenous peoples and nations on the Durham-Scarborough Bus Rapid Transit project. I would also like to take a moment to talk about safety. Safety is our top priority at Metrolinx, so I'd like to begin with a safety moment. As Ontarians, we have remained united in our collective effort to limit the spread of COVID-19. As we begin June with the first phase of Ontario's reopening plan, tentatively slated to begin later this month, a reminder to all just how far we've come and to remain vigilant in following public health directives. I'd then like to talk about some of the format and expectations for tonight. So before we begin, I would like to just speak again, sorry about the expectations for today. After the presentation concludes, we will be taking written questions submitted via Slido on Metrolinx Engage. From there, my colleague Jackie will be taking the lead in moderating the Zoom room, where participants will have the opportunity to ask their questions live. We have scheduled this session to last 1 hour. We will begin with a brief presentation, and then we will take as many questions as possible. As we often see a lot of repetition in the questions, and in an effort to avoid answering duplicative questions, I'd ask that you scroll through the existing questions, and if you see one that covers your area of interest, please vote it up. This will allow us to answer as many different questions as possible. And again, we will be answering those based on popularity, and also a reminder that you can continue to submit your questions at any time during the presentation. If there wasn't time to get to your question, we will be posting answers on Metrolinx Engage within 14 business days. We ask that you please be mindful that conduct inconsistent with our policies will result in the removal of comments and questions. We encourage all attendees to be respectful and keep the conversation relevant to the Durham-Scarborough BRT project and the preliminary designs for Oshawa. Again, if you've just joined us, our event is being closed captioned. To use this feature, simply enable it on your video player. We are committed to continuing the conversation about the Durham BRT and will be establishing community liaison committees towards the end of 2021 or early 2022. These committees will allow us to foster consistent dialogue between local stakeholders such as residents, businesses, community groups, and associations, and other institutions such as schools and hospitals on the work to be completed post-environmental assessment into our detailed design and construction stages. I would now like to introduce our wonderful panel this evening. So first we have Matthew Getsky, Vice President of Planning for Metrolinx, Rajesh Ketarpal, VP of Community Engagement, Metrolinx, David Dunn, Manager, Rapid Transit Office, Durham Region, and William Holmes, General Manager, Durham Region Transit, and David Hopper, our Consultant Lead, Parsons IBI Group. With that, I'll pass it to Matthew to provide an overview of the Durham-Scarborough BRT project.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn, and happy to have you take a bit of your time to take part in this session. So just a quick introduction on the Bus Rapid Transit project and its objectives. If you can move to the next slide, please. So it's an ambitious project. It's part of the 2041 Regional Transportation Plan. There were some early mentions to it in the previous transportation plans at the scale of the region. So it's a 36-kilometer corridor running along Highway 2 and then going into Ellesmere into Toronto. It's really hitting some of the key urban growth centers that like a string of pearls all the way through Durham region, as well as a number of key institutions such as universities, hospitals, administrative centers, amenities like libraries, major malls, and that's where kind of it's because of that it's a high performing project because it covers needs of a wide range of users. So hospital workers or people going to either future customers for the malls or people working in the malls and students. So there's a lot of different populations that will continue to grow and that will be using this this corridor. Next slide, please. Just to explain what is the concept behind the acronym BRT for Bus Rapid Transit. So the objective is to provide dedicated lanes for the buses where this is feasible. There, the key here is both to be able to have shorter travel times, but mostly to increase the reliability of the transit service. So we know reliability is key for a number of users, and I'll talk about that a little bit further later. That also enables, because of that reliability, it enables frequent service. So there we're looking at a 5-minute frequency during the peak hours, which can be really on the dot and provide a bus strictly every 5 minutes and not be sensitive to bus bunching or things like that that would alter the quality of the service for the customers. Along that, so there's a number of enablers that support that, including smart signals to enable and support that reliability, and also a lot of connections with other either TTC routes or other DRT routes that will be feeding into that east-west corridor. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this has been in the works, at least on paper, for some time, and really ties in with a number of other planning exercises led by the city of Oshawa and its own integrated transportation master plan, and by Durham region. So the objective is really to provide that infrastructure spine to support the mobility hubs and the urban growth center in all of the towns that the BRT crosses in Durham region. Next slide, please. So in 2018, for this project, we had done a first evaluation of its potential and the benefits for the region. These are illustrated in the little frame on the right. So there's a number of different benefits that we're looking at. 9.5 minutes saved per rider. So that's that overall time that's being saved in total, and that's a key. That's a key driver of customer behavior. We know that if you can save a few minutes over traveling by car, you're much more susceptible to take transit, and that's something that we're aiming at. The other benefit in the lower right is the reduction in average bus delays. That's that reliability piece. So trying to make sure that if you have a bus every 5 minutes, you basically only wait for a bus for up to 4 minutes maximum, but not more than that. So you won't end up having buses stuck and then wait for them for 14, 15 minutes, which is particularly important for in the winter months, as we know. There are some other benefits, such as the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that will be reduced because of that. So with the different forecasting models that are based on real demand across the region, we expect 162,000 tons of carbon dioxide to be reduced because of cars being of people choosing transit over cars. And the final benefit that we focus on is the safety benefit. So looking at really developing solutions all along the corridor to reduce traffic accidents and injuries. Packaged, all of this packaged together is we evaluate these benefits, and today we get to a benefit cost ratio of 1.29, which means that for every dollar that will be invested in this project, there's more than $1 going back to the region through these different types of economic benefits. Next slide, please. Just a quick, there again, we've had throughout the consultation process over on this project, we've had a number of questions on why this is the preferred route, why this rather than Rossland or Taunton, how does this work in parallel to the rail line? So again, this is part of a full network of solutions to provide transit options for different transit needs. So it runs alongside the rail, but really directly serving a number of urban growth centers. So it serves really quite a different purpose, and also helps people who are not trying to go into the downtown Toronto area, but going straight to some of the key destinations on the eastern side of Toronto and then within and across Durham region. And it's complemented also by a number of north-south corridors that are being also considered, that are mentioned in the 2041 regional transportation plan, such as Simcoe Street, which has been identified as another key corridor with high demand, where reliability and time savings would be important. And so there you see on this map, so the darker green shades show the forecasted densities. So depending on the land use documents that are prepared by each of the municipalities, this is where the growth is going to continue to concentrate and intensify. And so you can see that this corridor really connects all of these together and brings residents and jobs closer to each other. And that's what really serves the regional economy. And it's also supported by current ridership data. And for the next slide, I'll pass it over to Bill Holmes to tell us a bit more about the ridership. Or is it David? Sorry, it's David.
It's David. Thanks, Mathieu. So based on the growth and densities that Mathieu was just talking about, the two images that are shown here show a representation of the current and forecasted ridership numbers on the key routes in Durham. And while you can see routes like Roslyn and Taunton do have considerable ridership, and they also have future high-frequency transit routes planned on them, the highest growth in the future ridership will be occurring along the Highway 2 and Simcoe Street corridors. And these two corridors are really the proposed anchors of the transit system in Durham region and require the dedicated transit infrastructure to meet the ridership demand shown here. And while this study is looking at BRT on Highway 2, the region of Durham will also be commencing a visioning study and environmental assessment later this year to study rapid transit on Simcoe Street. So please keep your eye out for notice of this study to get involved with it. Next slide, please, and I'll pass it off to David Hopper.
Great, thank you, Dave, and good evening, everybody. So this project, we've been working with Metrolinx and the region and all the municipalities now for a couple of years. We've started with the first round of engagement, looking at the overall project plan, moving through some concepts for the corridors, and then working our way down to a preferred corridor, which is where we are now. We're getting close to a draft environmental project report that is now being circulated with the various ministries for review, and that will launch our formal TPAP, or Transit Project Assessment Process, which is the name for the environmental assessment for transit projects, which kicks off the 185-day statutory process. We expect that to start in July and run through the end of the year. So we've had several rounds of engagement, including tonight. There will be one more formal round once we get into the actual environmental assessment to focus on those effects and events. Go to the next slide, please. So there has been a number of rounds of consultation, as I mentioned. We have had focused consultation in each of the municipalities, including in Oshawa. We've had a number of people attending at open houses, looking at the website, responding back to us with comments at the events, as well as interacting with staff at those events. Obviously, in the last year or so, we've moved to a virtual platform. And actually, ironically, we've seen an increased participation, primarily because people can go to the website and read the material anytime. They don't necessarily have to be at City Hall between 2 and 4 on a Thursday afternoon. And we're continuing to engage as we move through and work towards the end of our preliminary design phase and get ready for the formal EA coming up this summer. The next slide, please. So within Oshawa, the solution is really subdivided into 3 separate zones. Starting at the west end, at the boundary with Whitby, we see median transit lanes coming across Whitby. In fact, the median transit lanes extend almost all the way to Scarborough Centre. So we'll have widened the road from 4 lanes to 6 lanes from the boundary through Thornton as far as Waverley, where King and Bond split. The intention here is to maintain 4 lanes of general traffic for all of those people who can't or choose not to take transit. We know that even when this line is successful, we'll carry about 30 to 40% of the trips, so we still need to provide auto capacity for the remaining people who are on the road. The intention is the bus lanes will be in the middle with a island separating them, which will limit left-hand turns on and off King Street, both at driveways and at unsignalized side streets. What will happen there, we'll see in a second, is it's replaced by left turns and U-turns at every signalized intersection along the corridor. There'll be a stop at Thornton, both to serve Trent University, but also to serve some of the businesses in that area, as well as the north-south routes, bus route. At Waverley, we will be adding a westbound left-hand turn lane and a traffic signal there to allow U-turns for people who are coming westbound on Bond, who need to get to one of the homes or businesses along there to be able to go to Thornton and make a U-turn to come back. Once we get beyond the split and we're onto King Street going eastbound into Zone 2, the buses will transition to a dedicated lane on the curb side. So along the curb side, we'll run from there through with dedicated infrastructure through as far as Simcoe, with stops at Gibbons, Park, Centre, and Simcoe. What we've looked at is where we can potentially reallocate street parking, how we can improve the sidewalks along this corridor, as well as how we manage right-hand turns in and out of both driveways and local side streets along the corridor. The bus route will actually continue east of Simcoe Street out as far as Ritson before turning up to the current bus turnaround on William Street, just south of the Costco, before coming westbound on Bond. Eventually, this route will turn south on Ritson to tie into the new GO station that's planned. In the short term, we'll be looping on William Street and then coming back westbound on Bond in mixed traffic till we get to Simcoe, where again the infrastructure will restart in Zone 3. And transit will operate in the curb lane. So we'll see a red painted or a red asphalt BRT lane. Coming west, we'll have the same stops at Simcoe, Centre, Park, and Gibbons, and at Stevenson. And then west of Stevenson, when the bus comes around the corner towards Waverley, they'll transition back to the median BRT lanes to carry on to the west limit and out into Whitby. Go to the next slide, please. So particularly in the segment 1, this is a blow up in more detail of the stop at Thornton. We can see the 2 bus platforms shown here in blue. They're on the far side of the intersection, so when the buses approach, the smart traffic signals that Matthew mentioned will know the bus is coming and will either hold the green light or change the light so the buses stay on schedule. They'll go through the light and then stop and have all the passenger interaction at the stop, and then as soon as they're ready to, they can depart and keep rolling. We have dedicated left turn U-turn lanes as well. And for safety reasons, we're replacing the left turns across the bus lanes with concentrated left and U-turns at signalized intersections. So left turns and U-turns will function much like advanced left turns today. They will be the only traffic that's moving. And we found on Viva and Highway 7 that this is actually significantly safer than the road we see today. When we looked at the traffic volumes, we see upwards of 1,000 cars per hour today traveling through here, which is more than can be handled by 1 lane of traffic. And our projections out to 2041 indicate somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 cars an hour. To put that in context, a single lane of urban roadway can carry about 800 cars. So while we are looking to improve transit and improve the reliability and encourage more people to take transit, we are also trying to limit traffic infiltration into local neighborhoods by providing enough capacity on King Street in order to handle the traffic. Go to the next slide, please. So here's a schematic of how the turns would be made. So if you're traveling westbound, you'd be following the yellow path. So instead of making a left-hand turn directly off King into your local side street, you would proceed to the next traffic light to the west, use the dedicated U-turn movement, and come back around and then turn right into the local side street. As I mentioned, as part of Vision Zero as well, widening roads out to 6 lanes really does require a median down the center to help reduce collisions, particularly with transit infrastructure where the speed of the buses might be slightly different than the speed of traffic at rush hour. It also improves the pedestrian experience because you're not having to watch for as many conflicting moves as your pedestrian crossing a side street. It also improves the facility for cyclists, which will be providing cycling facilities along most of the corridor paralleling the BRT as well. As I mentioned, York Region saw a 50 to 74% reduction in collisions along the corridor, primarily due to the change in left turn traffic. Have the next slide, please. So this is a video that was put together by Viva on Highway 7. You can see the 2 red BRT lanes in the middle of the road and the stops. Each stop is at a signalized intersection so that passengers can use the traffic lights and the crosswalks to get to and from the intersection. And I'm wondering, could you run the video for us? I'm not sure whether that's going to work on this platform. Okay, so we can't get that to run tonight. What we will do is when we send the presentation out, we'll provide the link. What this video walks through is the process of seeing how the cars will make the left and the U-turn on a protected phase. Then when that phase is finished, we get the east and west flow of traffic on King Street along with the buses. And then when the east-west traffic stops and we move to north-south traffic, then the pedestrians can cross to and from the transit island. There's also a protected zone at the end of the platforms at the crosswalk. So as you're waiting for your turn to cross off the roadway, you're in a safe and protected space. Can I have the next slide, please? So as I mentioned, we will be adding a traffic signal at Waverley. We have a westbound dedicated left-hand turn lane in order to serve the community south of King Street. As well, we have a dedicated left-hand U-turn lane for eastbound cars to turn around to get to the businesses on the north side or to get to the cemetery entrance. Again, we found that the traffic volumes through this area are going to require 2 eastbound and 2 westbound general traffic lanes as well as the transit lanes. We can see the improved sidewalks along this stretch. We'll get to the other active transportation solutions in just a minute, but we are looking to improve active transportation because we know every transit trip begins and ends as a pedestrian trip or an active trip. Could I have the next slide, please? So once we get onto either King or Bond, this would be the lane configuration. Generally, King Street and Bond Street are 4 lanes in each direction today, 3 or 4. The intent is to convert the curb lane, as you can see, with red asphalt for the buses only. The other 2 lanes would be for the other traffic. The reason we're doing this is that this will allow us to widen the sidewalks, to provide sidewalks that are more up to current accessibility standards. We have looked to see that the traffic can be accommodated by the 2 remaining traffic lanes. It does maintain left and turn right access across the bus lane in this particular area. It avoids a lot of the impacts to adjacent buildings, and it does definitely minimize impacts both to cultural heritage as well as the downtown character in downtown Oshawa. Could I have the next slide, please? So this is in segment 2, we're operating eastbound on King Street. We can see the stops at the circles, as I mentioned, at Stevenson, Gibbons, Park Center, and Simcoe. In this stretch, we see about 1,100 vehicles per hour in the afternoon, and that increases to around 1,300 to 1,500 by 2041, which is still easily handled by 2 general traffic lanes. Once we get beyond Simcoe Street, the buses will move into a mixed traffic operation as far as Ritson, as I mentioned earlier. You see the next slide, please. Similarly, once the buses have turned around, they will head back and come into the dedicated transit infrastructure starting at Simcoe Street. The same 5 stops are mirrored from King to Bond. In this stretch, we see heavier traffic in the morning. Today, it's around 1,000 vehicles an hour, and by 2041, we see this increasing slightly less than the eastbound in the 1,200 to 1,400 range, which can very easily be handled by 2 lanes of general traffic westbound. Could I have the next slide, please? So this is a bird's eye view looking down at the King and Bond intersection. So we can, from King and Bond at Park Street, excuse me. So we see Bond Street on the left-hand side with the buses coming towards the bottom of the photograph. We can see the stop on the far side of the intersection. We see the dedicated red asphalt lane for the buses. We also see here a dedicated right-hand turn lane on the far side of the bus lane. Where the volumes warranted, we have tried to include right-hand turn lanes. You can also see on the right-hand side of the screen, King Street going eastbound with the far side stop, and as well the dedicated right-hand turn lane, because Park is such a major north-south thoroughfare. Some of the other streets don't have dedicated right-hand turn lanes. In that case, the cars would be allowed to use the BRT lane for a specific portion of the lane in order to facilitate right-hand turns. Can I see the next slide, please? So we are looking at the stop design. What we'll see in the environmental assessment is not the actual final architectural design. What it really is meant to show is the overall size and scale of the stop. So what we're looking at is something that is relatively contemporary. Where we are in median operation, the stop would have a concrete jersey barrier along the backside to protect users from the traffic beyond. It would be glazed from waist height up to improve visibility in and out of the stop. We have room for full accessibility, so there's places for wheelchairs to sit and turn around. We're looking at off-board fare collection to speed up boarding and alighting from the buses. We'll have information about when the next bus is coming, maps to get you oriented. You can also see the yellow tactile warning strip for people with vision issues. The intent as well is to have glazing on the bus side with openings that align with the doors of the buses. And the intent here is to create more weather protection, particularly for winter weather when we see snow and driving rain. We are also looking at making sure these platforms are the same height as the floor of the bus, so there will be no step to go in, or we don't have to have the buses either kneel or deploy a ramp for people with mobility challenges getting on and off. There's a number of different designs based on the road width, so we have a sort of 2 standard sizes. And the intent here is to create a fairly uniform look along the corridor where people recognize the shelter design as well as the red asphalt lane as part of the BRT system, to be a reminder that it's available if and when they need it. Can I have the next slide, please? We do recognize that taking away or dedicating transit in the curb lanes on King and Bond in downtown will have an impact on parking. We are looking to minimize or eliminate that impact, and we're working with the City of Oshawa to find some solutions for this on-street parking. We will see some spaces on Bond Street. We lose one on the north, but we can gain some on the south side of Bond. King Street is a little more challenging, and we may lose as many as 13 parking spaces. To put that in context, there are 919 on-street parking spaces downtown and almost 2,300 in off-street parking lots. So even if we are not successful in finding replacements for all of them, that's actually a very small percentage of the number of spots that are available. But I said we are working with city staff to find ways to replace all of the on-street parking. Could I have the next slide, please? Active transportation is a very important component, and we are looking to fill in gaps in both the sidewalk and cycling infrastructure along the corridor. Throughout most of the corridor, as you can see here in blue, we will be adding new cycling facilities. The intent is to use cycle tracks, so they will be raised up at curb height, up at the sidewalk level, rather than being in the traffic lane. So once you get to the curb will rise up. There'll be a a boulevard, and then a cycling lane, and then a sidewalk outside of that. There are a number of pinch points like downtown Oshawa, downtown Whitby, Pickering Village, and the bridge over the Rouge River, where there just isn't physically enough space for the cycling infrastructure to be immediately adjacent to the BRT lanes. In those cases, we're working with the local active transportation plans to make sure that we have parallel routes that are as close as possible and tie in with the dedicated infrastructure. In the case of Oshawa, the intention is to use Thornton to tie north to Adelaide and south to Gibb as the primary alternate routes. With the wider sidewalks and with the curb lanes, there may also be people who choose to continue to cycle along King and Bond, and that activity will be better than it is today doing that same operation in mixed traffic. Can I have the next slide, please? So what are the benefits of BRT? Well, what we're doing is we're improving about 5 kilometers of sidewalk within Oshawa to bring it up to a modern standard. We will be replacing the 2 bridges over Oshawa Creek to include accessible sidewalks on both sides of the bridges. We're also looking to make sure that the north-south pathway down at creek level can be accommodated. We're looking at improving the reliability of transit through downtown, particularly on days when the weather is bad or when there are delays on Highway 401 and traffic is diverted. We are looking at how this actively connects to the proposed Simcoe Street corridor to make for a seamless transfer if necessary, and also to allow for buses to interline and run on both Simcoe and King and Bond. We're looking at maintaining adequate general traffic capacity throughout Oshawa to make sure that we don't drive traffic onto local neighborhood streets. We're looking at how that will minimize infiltration. We're looking at how to improve the public realm along the corridor to help improve attractiveness for pedestrian activity in the downtown, to provide greater access to businesses and more opportunities for streetscaping. And what we're seeing in all of this is this will tend to attract development, it will attract retail, it will attract pedestrians, and provide the growth that we want to see in the downtowns. One of the studies that we have seen is the King Street streetcar pilot in Toronto. Initially, there was some negative press around this, as it takes a while for people to get used to new transit solutions. But what we're seeing over the last, not maybe not last year, but in the second year of the program, is we're actually seeing an increase in retail spending along that corridor. The mix of businesses is changing slightly, but we're actually seeing a positive economic benefit along that corridor. Same as we have on St. Clair, and the same as we're seeing along Highway 7 on the Viva system in York Region. Can I have the next slide, please? So we do see with these kinds of investments, we do see economic benefits. The BRT in London is spurring a lot of development along that corridor. The extract on the right from Viva Region is showing a significant increase in jobs and businesses that are choosing to move into the corridor. We're seeing a major increase in the amount of office space and employment growth. We're seeing a large increase in the number of residential units as well coming into the corridor. And in fact, on most BRT systems across North America, where we're in a positive environment, as we are in Durham as the fastest growing region in the Greater Toronto Area, we'll see that transit is another catalyst to help accelerate that and to achieve the goals of both the city's official plan as well as the region's official plan, as well as Metrolinx's objectives to move more people by transit. Can I have the next slide, please? And so I'll wrap it up here and turn it back to Matthew to wrap up before we move to the Q&A.
Thank you, David. So in terms of next steps, so the objective is by the end of spring, which is coming pretty soon, to finalize the draft environmental project report that will be the basis for the environmental assessment. We're also going to bring an update to Durham Region Council through their committee of the whole next week, I think on the 9th. Then in the summer, we'll initiate the transit project assessment process, so that environmental assessment, looking really specifically at the environmental impacts such as noise, vibration, water, heritage, and there will be a specific public information center really focused on those that will be organized throughout the summer. And then that will enable us to package all of these elements into a what we call a preliminary design business case by the end of the year or early next year, where we really go back to all the benefits, all the design proposals, all the mitigations, all the adjustments that we've brought throughout the consultation, and make the best case to assemble the funding for the project. Then after that, should funding be provided, we will continue with the consultation during the whole detailed design stage, and then also throughout construction. So in terms of detailed design, there's a number of refinements we still have to work on. So David mentioned some of the design of the shelters, for example, but then there's also some fine tuning of platform locations, the sidewalks, kind of looking really at even in a more granular way than what we've presented to you today. And then establish some community liaison committees to make sure that we're in permanent contact with the community, especially in preparation of the construction, there to really understand all the constraints and make the construction as painless as possible for all of the residents and businesses around the corridor. And there's a number of ways to continue to stay engaged with us, so via email or through the website, and there you have both references are there. And but I think and then it's very easy. You can Google them. You'll get there pretty straightforward way too. And that ends this presentation. And back to you, Jocelyn, for the Q&A. You're on mute.
Oh, well, you think I would have learned by now this far into it. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for that great presentation. So I'll just do a quick reintroduction. For those who have just joined us, thank you for participating in our Durham-Scarborough Bus Rapid Transit Virtual Open House. My name is Jocelyn Stenner from Metrolinx. This event is being closed captioned. To use this feature, enable it on your video player. So now we're going to go into the Slido questions. So the first question, Metrolinx, Durham, and Oshawa all want to reduce car use, increase transit use. Wouldn't converting lanes west of Waverley instead of widening be more effective? So I think I'll pass this one off to Matthew to start.
Yep, thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you for this question. It is what we're trying to do is provide a lot of different options for a rapidly growing region. So I think it was a few months ago, the census results show that over the past year, the Oshawa metropolitan area, from a census perspective, was the fastest growing metropolitan area in all of Canada. So that growth is going to be sustained. It's kind of the success of the region is very clear. So we know that traffic will continue and mobility needs will continue to increase over the next 20 years. So we're trying to find the right balance here between making sure that we're providing good options for environmentally respectful transit solutions, and then still provide the options for people who can't choose transit for a variety of reasons. Between peak and off-peak travel, the services are different, but these things can change also in the future. If you're going for a big grocery shop, it might not be convenient to take transit. So we want to maintain these options open, and we're really relying on a lot of that demand forecasting through a number of models that tell us that if we just did the conversion and stuck to the existing width, it wouldn't work, and it would generate unacceptable congestion throughout Oshawa. David, I don't know if you have a couple of numbers. I think you had them on the slides, but I'll let you bring that back.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. So I did touch on that we see about 1,100, 1,200 cars per hour each direction through the street today, which is fairly generous on 2 lanes of traffic. We see that increasing to somewhere between 12 and 1,500 cars per hour by 2041, and that really is well beyond the capacity of a single lane. So if we were to convert the 2 middle lanes and leave 1 lane in each direction, we would see very significant congestion, which would tend to cause a lot of neighborhood infiltration. So we are trying the carrot approach rather than the stick as well. So we are maintaining capacity, and then as the region grows, the road will be more and more congested, and people will see more of the benefits of taking transit. We also know that if you're doing a daycare run, or if you live down near the harbor and need to go to North Whitby, it may not be as convenient to make that trip. It may be more convenient to stay in your car, or if you have a job in sales and you need to be carrying samples with you, you're not going to take public transit. What we are hoping, though, is that the reliable service will convince more people who are traveling just along the corridor, and we think there's about 40% of the trips are actually right along the corridor, will choose transit more often with this service, and that will reduce the demand for increased road capacity elsewhere in the region. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a great answer, Matthew and David. So we're going to move on to the second question. Could we please have more than 160 characters to ask questions? So I think I'm going to pass this one off to Raj.
Thanks, Jocelyn, and thank you for that question. So the 160 characters is a standard in Slido to ensure that we can use the platform effectively. Having said that, for anyone who's interested in writing longer questions, they can feel free to submit to our metrolinxengage.com contact us page, or emailing us at Durham-Scarborough@metrolinx.com. And alternatively, as we've mentioned off the top, that we have our Zoom room running simultaneously this evening, where you are able to ask live questions. And we do have a number of participants in the room already, and we certainly do look forward to your questions there.
Thanks, Raj. Okay, so question 3, why are the planned bike lanes not continuous along the BRT line? So I'm going to pass this one off to David Hopper.
Thanks, Jocelyn, and that's a good question. We do know that in some of the constrained areas along the corridor in the downtowns, there just physically is not enough space to provide general traffic capacity, dedicated transit lanes, sidewalks, and cycling facilities. We've tried to provide them paralleling the corridor for as much of the line as we can, and where we can't squeeze it in, we have made sure that we are tying east-west connections to the plan, to the local plan. So as I mentioned, Oshawa has a plan for cycling facilities both on Adelaide Street and Gibb, and the intention is to use those as the alternate corridors paralleling King Street.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we'll go to question 4. Are there plans of extending GO train lines and to Curtis? If yes, what's the schedule like? So I'll give this one to Matthew.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you for this question. So tonight we'd like to focus a bit more on the specific project that we're working on, which is the BRT. But just to respond to that, we are working diligently and with the region on the extension of the rail network. It's a really exciting project, and all of these really fit together. What we're trying to do for across the growing this growing part of the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So all of Durham region, in percentage points, it's forecasted to be the fastest growing region or sub-region of the entire metropolitan area. And that requires a whole network of transit solutions. So the rail solution will enable people to really go all the way to the downtown at very competitive travel times compared to driving along the highway, for example. The BRT here will provide another type of service, get people directly to some key destinations along the way, including across the region, which is, today the rail corridor is a little bit further south. It's slightly separated from the urban growth centers, so the access, the first or the last mile access to your destinations is sometimes a little bit trickier. So we're really trying to build that entire network, and the rail extension plus the BRT plus other north-south corridors and also some other east-west. The transportation plan also looks at Taunton as a long-term priority bus opportunity for east-west to connect the northern parts of Durham region. All these really work together as a network to provide the right solutions for all the different types of people who want to move across the region and connect with Toronto.
Very good. Thank you so much. So question 5, when is the estimated time period the construction will start? What year? So maybe I will send that back to Matthew.
Sure, I can start. So in terms of next steps, so first, once we wrap up this preliminary design stage and the environmental assessment, then we agree on the overall funding for the project. Then it triggers another stage of detailed design where we look really at every single little intersection, to the centimeter to look at where we're going to put the curbs. So that's that detailed design stage that would take at least another year or so, a year and a half, including public procurement. And then that will also determine how we stage the implementation of the corridor. It's 36 kilometers. We can't do, and we wouldn't do all the work on the entire 36-kilometer corridor at the same time. It's going to be in different stages. So that's also a piece that will be determined during the detailed design. So the earlier segments, there are some early works and early segments that have been prepared by Durham Region that will start, but not in Oshawa, but that can start a little bit earlier. The later corridors, you'll have 1 or 2 seasons of construction stretched out over something like a 5-year period. But all that staging needs to happen. And there's also work on utilities. So there again, we're trying to, when you build a big piece of infrastructure like this, there's coordination with the municipality and other stakeholders to make sure that we're coordinating our work on utilities. And if we can do that, that might also change the staging. So that will come. We'll be able to give you a detailed, a precise date for the specific Oshawa stretches in Oshawa, I would say in a year or a year and a half. But the idea is within kind of that 5-6 year overall horizon.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next question is, how far east of downtown will Highway 2 BRT service run? Will they connect to Curtis? So I'm going to pass that over to Bill.
Thank you, Jocelyn. As David had indicated earlier, this BRT construction project is planned through to Simcoe, and the Pulse network along Highway 2 will be extending through. At this point, it extends to Ritson Road. As the Lakeshore East GO extension comes to fruition, we do have plans for the Pulse to turn down Ritson and connect in at the Ritson station at the Knox location. And we also currently have the Route 902, which operates along Highway 2 between the Oshawa Centre along King to Bowmanville. So that service is currently available and will continue to be available. And it's running at this point as frequent as every 20 minutes. So it really is a good, reliable, and frequent connection for anyone east of Oshawa to connect into downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next question, if vehicles can't turn left because the new median, where will westbound traffic be able to do U-turns, Thornton or Gerrard? So maybe I will pass this over to David Hopper.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So yes, you will be able to make left turns and U-turns at every signalized intersection. So in the West End, it will be at Waverley and at Thornton and at Gerrard. The other thing we will be looking at, and we've started to look at, are some of those blocks quite long, and is there the need for an intermediate signal? We've looked at a couple of locations further west where that is being done. And this will be a similar pattern along the entire corridor. So everywhere there's a signalized intersection, we will allow U-turns, and we will be looking to see whether we need to add 1 or 2 additional signals along the corridor to make sure that people don't have to go too far out of their way to be able to make that U-turn happen. Thanks, Jocelyn.
Thank you. So we do have a Zoom room where folks can ask live questions. So I think we're going to go ahead and answer 2 more questions on this side. There's still lots of questions to get through, but we want to give those folks waiting patiently an opportunity to ask their questions. So again, we'll do 2 more questions on our side, and then I'll pass it along to my colleague Jackie for some live questions, and then maybe we'll get back into some of these Slido questions that have been submitted. So the next question: how will the BRT platforms connect with on-demand and other intersecting bus routes? Maybe I'll give this to Bill.
Thank you, Jocelyn. One of our key objectives is really to look at some key hub locations where the various services can connect and people can transfer between local routes, between on-demand and Pulse, and also our specialized services in the Pulse to move people across the region. So definitely these locations will be key areas where people will be able to safely and easily connect and transfer between the various services that will be operating. Thank you.
Thank you.
And maybe if I can add, in the downtown area, where what we've tried to do is already locate the platforms as close as possible to the key intersections, such as Simcoe, for example, which we know is a very busy bus corridor. And with the expanded sidewalks, it will give also an added comfort for customers transferring from or moving from one north-south bus stop to the BRT corridor, and very close to the intersection. So then you can access your stop in a very safe way with a traffic signal. So that's the design has really been already including that to make sure that we're making the shortest possible transfers and making them as comfortable as possible at the sidewalk level.
Thank you. So again, we're going to do one last question from Slido, and then we're going to go to the Zoom room. So the last question is, can Metrolinx create attractive stations and avoid taking a minimalistic, no frills approach? So I don't know, Metu, if you want to start off, and then maybe David can supplement as well.
Sure, I can start off. I think I'm not. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure minimalistic, no frills is necessarily unattractive, but we're definitely looking at stations that will provide a number of quality functions for the customers. So proper weather protection, good space for people with specific mobility needs. David mentioned trying to have level boarding to make it easier also to access the buses. And then trying to have a design that we know that the corridor goes through a number of different neighborhoods, different types. So we want to have a consistent design along the entire corridor. There are some areas where it goes through also some heritage downtown. So we do want to minimize kind of the aesthetic while keeping it consistent. So I think it's definitely going to be less minimalistic than just a sign on a post, which sometimes happens on some bus routes today. So it will really give all of the comfort that customers are looking for and the safety that is required to protect them for their up to 5-minute wait at the station. And we'll be careful. We'll work on the design to make it as attractive as possible, but without adding any specific frills to that either, because we do believe that consistent approach is important for the entire corridor.
Thank you so much. David, did you have anything further to add, or can we go over to Jackie?
I would just add that there is research out there to say that attractive stops make for safer spaces, make for spaces that the public are more willing to look after rather than deface. So we do want to encourage the appropriate behavior. We do know that pleasant spaces also make people's perceived wait time shorter. So we also have to remember, though, that a lot of these stops along the corridor are in the middle of the road. So we have salt spray in the winter and other issues that we need to be aware of. So they do need to be hardy, they need to be robust, they need to be easily maintained. So there's a whole series of factors that go into it, but definitely we're seeing a trend across North America to mirror Europe and make things more attractive. In the past, we have had trouble getting agreement to spend money on making things beautiful, but I think we're starting to see that pays off, that if we make things attractive, we actually attract people and encourage the kind of behavior that we want. So that will be the balance going forward.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, so as mentioned, we have folks who are patiently waiting to ask their live questions. So I know initially this meeting was slated to go until 7:30, but we're receiving a lot of good questions and comments, so we want to keep working through that. So we're going to go ahead and extend till 8 o'clock just so we can answer as many of these questions as possible. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jackie to take us over to the Zoom room.
I can start. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a very important point that you're highlighting here is, how far in the future are we protecting from? Today, well, first I would say, we're really excited to be working on some good quality BRT projects. I think bus rapid transit across the world, we don't have a lot of examples in Canada. York region has heavily invested in BRT projects, and they're paying off right now very well. And pre-COVID, their ridership was rapidly growing, and the service level was really widely recognized. So bus rapid transit solutions are actually world proven solutions for these type of kind of long distance corridors, for which we're 36 kilometers is getting pretty long across a region, and that's and we can make the bus service and the quality of the service very comparable to an LRT service. The big difference there, and I think that's the point you were trying to highlight in your question, is what capacity are we building it for, and are the buses going to be really crowded if the growth continues beyond 2041, and then we'll see in 2045 really crowded buses, and then we might regret not investing in an LRT. today, all of the forecasting effort actually protects us for well beyond 2041. We see that with the growth that is forecasted, and we use all of the land use documents that are provided, so we're really tracking very closely that rapid growth of the area. We are protecting for beyond 2041 in terms of the bus capacity. We know that that 5-minute frequency in 2041 will work for the capacity, for the number of people who will want to move east-west. But we know that in the future, that frequency can also increase. There are a number of bus rapid transit corridors that function with 2-minute frequencies, 2-minute headways. So we can really double kind of that capacity. I mean, Durham has already invested in articulated buses that are also a solution that increases the capacity along the corridor. So we're very confident that on that, even beyond the 20-year horizon, which is our first time horizon that we're looking at, the capacity we're building with this piece of infrastructure will be comfortable for to accommodate for the growth throughout the region. So, then I would say on beyond 40 years, so looking at 2061, beyond that, there might be, that's something we can think of. And I would say building some bus infrastructure can help to prepare the way for a future potential LRT. But I would say the capacity there with good quality, reliable buses will have that capacity, no problem along that corridor, and we're very comfortable with the forecast that we have.
And if I could, I'd just like to add, Ottawa is now moving to LRT, but they have done that because they ran a very successful bus system for 30 years, based on the BRT concept. And what that allowed them to do, and the conversion downtown, was because they were approaching 10,000 people per hour at 140 buses an hour, which is a bus every 23 seconds. So they were really needed to move to LRT because they couldn't fit more buses in. But one of the other benefits of BRT is it would allow us to interline or create special routes. So for instance, if we see a large connection of riders between, say, the Trent University campus at King and Thornton and the Technical University, we could have a bus route that comes down Simcoe and runs along King. Or it could come down Simcoe and run along King and then go into downtown Whitby and then get onto the 412 and go across to York University. That kind of flexibility to give more people a one-seat ride, even though they're going sort of across the grid, is also a flexibility that only comes with BRT. And that was part of the success in Ottawa, was that you had local routes in the suburbs that connected people up and then became express into downtown. And that drove the ridership, which then created the demand for LRT. So we definitely think, given the densities and the size of the region, and the opportunities here, that this is the appropriate technology for the next 20 plus years.
And I just want to add on to those comments about the network, and just say, Tim, that we are moving towards electrification, and again, it won't be long. In the next couple of years, we'll have the first 8 electric buses running along the Pulse network. So in terms of emissions and sound and a quiet service, I mean, it's only going to get enhanced as we move and increase our technology. So that will really support the BRT as well.
I can start, and just if you can you repeat the beginning of the question? I didn't hear the first factor, if it was access to the businesses, or it broke up a little bit. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was the frontage piece that I hadn't heard well. So I would say overall, in throughout the downtown area, we're able to provide some expanded, continuous, accessible sidewalks. So there are some very clear improvements for the business frontages and that access that will come with the project. So so there I would say in the downtown, there's definitely some improvements that go with you know the streetscaping that goes along with the BRT. When we move west of Waverly, and maybe this is where your what your question is getting at, there are some there is that that raised median that constrains left turns. So we've heard that along the corridor on how is that compatible with maintaining quality access to the different businesses. And there, David mentioned it earlier. So we're really looking, and we're still looking, and during detailed design we can adjust the number of intersections. We can kind of review if there are some key areas which need some access to make sure that we put the signalized intersections in the right places to really minimize the access impacts for the businesses. And then with respect to the overall frontage, so even though there will be some road widenings west of Waverly, these widenings are within the overall right-of-way of the boulevard, and I would say the consistency of the streetscaping will be perceived, will be a significant benefit to the businesses that are nearby, as we know that today it's very highly heterogeneous. David, I don't know if you had anything to add on some of the impacts on the west side.
I would just add that we know that there are some older buildings that are closer to the road, and when we do actually go to widening, there will be a few properties that are more impacted than others. So I think there will be, during the detailed design, there will be plenty of opportunities to talk about ways to mitigate that. We have tried to look at, could we shift the road one way or the other to minimize impacts on both sides of the street. But when we do look at widening, there definitely will be impacts. So there will be discussions with Metrolinx and with the region moving forward in terms of land acquisition and what that does to existing businesses. So that process will all roll out as we move forward. Unfortunately, where we do widen and where we do have constrained areas, there will be impacts on property in some areas that are unavoidable, but we plan to work with everybody to find a solution to keep everybody whole.
And maybe if I can add on okay. I was just going to talk about additional consultation to say that I think if any individual businesses want to really zoom in on their property, the way they operate today, what are the constraints that are going to be, what constraints they have to operate their business, we're really open to having that conversation, review that in detail with them, continue to listen to their specific needs as a business, and then find the best solutions because each specific case is going to be different. So between a manufacturing site versus a commercial site or more of a service center, the needs are quite different. So we really have to look at that with you and with every individual business kind of one by one to understand their operating model, the constraints, and how we can find a good solution for that.
Yeah, so maybe just add a little bit more context on the types of supports that we offer businesses, and also to the second part of the question on how will your concerns be heard. So most of the elements of our business support program are determined once we have a successful proponent on board and we have a contract in place. Having said that, we do work closely with business improvement areas and local chambers of commerce for our projects that are in delivery, and to support and fund marketing and event initiatives. As Matthew mentioned, there are various direct one-to-one individual business supports that are offered to help with the development of marketing and promotional ideas, to help augment businesses where there is no BIA representation. And these supports, some examples include local marketing initiatives and signage and advertising. And as we already mentioned, that we do have our dedicated community engagement team. that is, focused in the Durham region and this project specifically. And they'll work with the proponent to ensure that your concerns are addressed promptly where possible, whether that's in and around procuring signage, moving signage or fencing, site cleaning, etc. So we are committed to actually working with you very closely in kind of a group kind of setting through our CLCs, direct one-to-one, and making ourselves available at any time. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, panelists. All right, we have our next question coming from Etcha. Etcha, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask your question. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm from Sydney, Australia, and I live in the Durham region. And since I moved to Canada, I've noticed that when people are traveling on the go or any other non-TTC transportation, some people are paying, somewhere around $400 a month to get to work. Is this going to be the same with the current Metrolinx? Is there anything that's going to happen that's going to link all these different transit systems so we're paying one monthly price and not paying $400 a month to get to work?
Thanks, Etcha. Over to you, panelists.
I can start. That's a very important question, and we understand. And same with me. I moved from Europe with a very integrated transit system at the scale of a metropolitan area. Here we have really a very broad metropolitan area with a number of regions, and there are different specific transit needs and transit authorities, and we've been pushing for the last at least for the last 3-4 years, really pushing actively to increase the integration of the different systems. So it started really with Presto to start by integrating it from an experiential point of view. So at least the fare payment, there's a common fare payment experience and common tools and a common card that works for most of the greater Golden Horseshoe. And then the next step is to look at fare integration. There are already a number of mechanisms that are in place. So as you may know, there are some what we call co-fare that enables people who are riding on a Durham region transit bus, for example, and who are connected to the GO train to have 75% of their bus fare being rebated to them. So they're only paying a fraction of the local connection to really address that kind of end-to-end journey costs for different travelers. And there's a number of schemes. We know there are what we call concessions also across the entire region. So whether it's for youth or young adults, or there are some specific concessions also for low income households, and these still, so I would say in terms of youth, they're very well integrated. On low income, that's a piece that we're still working on, but there are a number of initiatives that as we continue to develop this as an integrated network, we will have to find some better solutions for the integration of the actual fares and control the end-to-end journey costs for our customers. So it's an important question. It's challenging, but and yeah, maybe I see Bill wants to jump in, so I'll let you follow up.
I'll just build on what Matthew was indicating, and there really is a strong commitment from all of the regional transit agencies, the province and Metrolinx. We're actually working very diligently and closely to look at service integration, fare integration opportunities, recognizing that the key feature that we're looking at is that sort of one trip, one fare to get people from their origin to destination. So there's a number of barriers to getting there, but I think it's the first time that I've seen all agencies, including Metrolinx and the province, sitting down to actually hammer out what's really going to work and what do we need to do to eliminate those barriers. So a very timely question. It is exactly something that we're looking at in the GTHA to make real progress in the very short term. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Matthew and Bill. We're going to go to our next question coming from Diane. Diane has also asked me to read her question out. It is, will you be using ground penetrating radar for the lands near and at the Union Cemetery? Panelists, over to you.
Thank you. That's a great question. We have been doing a complete archaeological survey along the corridor. So we are looking at older buildings. We're looking at cemeteries. We're looking at older business communities. So there is a whole protocol in place under the Cemeteries Act and under the rules that guide archaeology. So we are making sure that in and around cemeteries in particular, we know there is experience where there are remains that are outside the formal boundaries of cemeteries. So our first attempt is to actually not widen the road in those areas, but to stay in areas that have already been disturbed. But yes, where there's indications, we do go through a series of, so like a 4-stage review. So the first is a desktop study where we look at historic records, look at old aerial photographs, and we work our way down. Then if there's more potential, then it gets into doing test pits, and possibly when we do get further down, we do get into things like ground penetrating radar as well as full-on archaeological investigation. So all of that is accounted for in the environmental assessment. There'll also be language in any contract that should we be doing widenings anywhere along the corridor, but particularly near cemeteries, if there are any indication of remains found, that there's a requirement to stop and bring archaeologists in to sort things out and to make sure that we're not disturbing remains. Or if we need to disturb remains, they're done in a respectful way and they're reinterred somewhere else. So yes, all of that is being accounted for in our environmental assessment. Great question, thank you.
Thanks so much, David. All right, we're going to go to our next person on the list. Nick, the floor is yours. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I appreciate your waitiness. What's happening is when you start, then your question gets in and is not answered. My question is very simple, this, gentlemen. Where are the buses for the, especially the number 9 bus that is? I'm sorry. Where is the number 9 bus westbound, which is the one that goes between Oshawa and the university? Where is it going to turn around? Where are they going to wait? Are they going to wait in the downtown core like they had been for 2 summers? And are they going to obey the bylaws of the city of Oshawa by not running for anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 hours while they're waiting for a connecting bus? I'm in a building, I'm condominium building that I'm on the board of directors, and we have a number of seniors, as well as 3 other towers that are going to be built in the next couple of years. What are they going to be able to do if where these buses are going to turn around and park so they're not impeding the air in the downtown core? Or are we all going to have all electric buses in the next 2 years?
I can take that question, and thank you very much. Just at this point in time, the Pulse Route 900, it terminates at Ritson and William Street. So our layover for the Pulse is at a station just adjacent to the Costco there on William Street. And that will be in place until such time that the Lakeshore East GO extension is completed. And at that point in time, our terminus location and layover will be at the new GO station down on Ritson. In terms of your question about electric buses, we are moving forward with our first pilot. So in a couple of years, you'll see the first 8 buses that will be on our street and operating on the Pulse network. And then from there, based on our transition plan, we'll start replacing the fleet over the next few years. And hopefully by 2035, we'll have a fully electric fleet.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Bill. All right, we're going to go to our next and what seems like our last question from Lee. Lee, go ahead and unmute yourself. You can ask your question.
Unmute, there we go. Thank you. First of all, thank you all for doing this. I got to say, whoever's in charge of the mail campaign, that's how you got me. I live directly south of King and Park, so this impacts me pretty directly. And I should declare that I'm an automotive journalist. I'm here as a citizen, though, so I'm not going to be, there's no gotcha questions coming from me. But I have to ask, I'm a lifelong Durham, Oshawa Whitby resident, and I've been on Highway 7 a number of times, and I have to say, I try to avoid it as a car person. I just, I'm sure it works beautifully, but I have a hard time envisioning a Viva-like situation being transplanted to Whitby, Oshawa. I'm just wondering how much work and study you put into, I assume it's a lot, but maybe you can enlighten me on just the nature, like these two regions, like just to use Markham Highway 7 as an example, it's much different than Whitby, Oshawa. Like the culture, I think, out here is a little bit different. People are very wedded to their cars. We have General Motors down by the lake. I'm sure you all know that. I'm just wondering how, because this is going to change people's behavior, right? And this is behavioral change type stuff. I think we all would agree on that. I'm just wondering how you see that transition kind of evolving, because like I was looking at Whitby. I grew up in Whitby, and I was looking at the plans for the Four Corners. I don't know if I'd want to be selling that, like closing it to cars completely. I just wonder how you kind of thought about this and the kind of analysis and the kind of data collection, the surveying. Like, what kind of feedback have you gotten? What questions have you asked? Like, there must be some. I'm just wondering what the response generally has been and how you foresee kind of overcoming. And I realize the horizons are long. Like, this isn't going to be happening tomorrow. But if you could just maybe. I'm just curious what that process has been like, because I would argue that this isn't Markham. Like, it's not, like, the character of this place is a bit different.
Thanks for your
maybe
great
I can
question,
start.
Lee. Yep, I'm just going to pass it over to the panelists. David, you can start us off then.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with a bit of the technical stuff, and then maybe Matthew and Bill can add some of the more policy stuff. But there's a study done once every 5 years called the Transportation Tomorrow Survey, and it is a long-term. It's done once every 5 years. It's been done since 1986, and it looks at exactly those kinds of things. It looks at travel behavior. It looks at what influences travel behavior. What we see is a very consistent pattern. When we put dedicated streetcar lanes on Spadina, we saw an increase in transit ridership. When we put dedicated streetcar lanes on St. Clair Avenue, we saw increased transit ridership. When we put the Viva lanes on Highway 7, we saw increased transit ridership. When we put some of the BRT lanes in Pickering and Ajax, we've seen increased ridership. The Pulse route now carries more than 3 million passengers per year. That's exceeded the expectations in the early planning. We do know that there's about 10% of the people in Oshawa who don't have access to a car for their primary work trips, maybe because there's 2 earners in a household and only 1 car. We do know there's a significant percentage of households that don't have a car at all. We also know there's a lot of people who are choosing to take public transit because of the environmental impacts, or like I do, because I would rather read for my 40-minute commute than focus on driving. So this kind of behavior has been modeled and is modeled very robustly in the Greater Toronto Area. And every time we've added things like this, we're seeing uptake. I mean, look at the GO train. In 1967, there was a GO train ran once an hour, and it was full. And it's basically ridership has grown every single year, or almost every year since it opened. So we do know that as congestion increases and as there are more people move into the region, we're seeing a more diverse population that come from different parts of the world where public transit is more the norm. We do see a desire for more environmentally friendly travel. So we do know that people respond well to frequency of service and reliability of service. So we've seen this across Canada in all major cities. We've seen it. Yes, Markham is different than Oshawa, but I would suggest that some of the work that's been done in Brampton with the Zoom service and in Vaughan are more similar to the east end of Durham region. And again, we've seen increased ridership every time we provide these services. So we do have very robust modeling, and we do have very robust examples that show that if we build it, they will come. It has happened in all other areas. Just a clarification, the solution in downtown Whitby is now actually a 3-lane solution, which has a dedicated eastbound traffic lane, a dedicated eastbound bus lane, and a mixed traffic lane westbound. So through traffic will be allowed through the Four Corners. And so we are working with the town of Whitby to find a solution to balance things in that particular pinch point. But I think, Bill, did you want to add anything about what you see in trends in the region?
Yeah, and I just want to add 2 points, and the first one is again, we're looking forward and ahead, and I think by 2041, if we don't take this action and improve transit and reliability, then our road network is going to be really suffer, and that's really part of why we need to move more people now and build this infrastructure so that we can move more people onto transit, so that for those people who choose, and as David indicated before, some people won't have a choice; they'll need to drive. They'll be able to still get around the region. So there really is that need for us to provide that service for our residents. And the second point I want to make is just something that really, we've always known it, but during the pandemic, it sort of really reminded us of the importance of public transit to many of our residents who we all rely on in terms of essential workers, et cetera. And we need to ensure that we're providing them with a reliable, consistent, and competitive transit and transportation network for them to get around as well. So, it's about ridership, but it's also about quality of service and making sure that people that need public transit in our community have a reliable system. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. So it looks like we've come to the end of our question period on Zoom. I'd like to thank everybody who asked their live questions. We really appreciate your feedback and the time that you've spent with us tonight, and all of the informative questions you've shared with us. And as a reminder, for the questions we haven't had a chance to address tonight, we'll aim to provide a written response posted on our website within 14 business days. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Jocelyn. Thanks, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jackie. So I know we said we're going to go till 8 o'clock. So I think we can sneak in 2 more questions here from Slido. So we'll go right into the next one up. So it's, will westbound traffic be able to turn left at Thornton?
So the short answer to that, Jocelyn, is yes. The longer answer is yes. At every signalized intersection, you will be able to turn left in all directions. So we're not changing the pattern at signalized intersections. We will be changing the pattern at unsignalized intersections in the West End, where we are introducing the median.
Thank you so much, David. Okay, so last but not least, is Oshawa planning on allowing greater densities along Highway 2 to take advantage of better transit?
I will answer that one.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So while we cannot speak for the city of Oshawa specifically, we can say that typically investment of this magnitude tends to generate increased interest in real estate, and this often translates into increased development densities. If you look at the city of Pickering, for example, the Highway 2 corridor is about to undergo significant intensification along the recently constructed BRT corridor. And this BRT project really does create a growth opportunity for Oshawa.
And maybe I can add just one word to say the regional transportation plan and the provincial growth plan, and then all the municipal plans on to accommodate that growth, they really go hand in hand. So the whole infrastructure network that is in that plan and that includes that BRT as an important component is really there to support and to provide that the level of support that's needed to be consistent with all of these these incredible the growth objectives throughout the region, which is both kind of I would say a proof of the success of the region, but also have to be managed from an infrastructure standpoint. So they go really hand in hand, and the planning work that the municipalities are leading is very tightly related to the transportation planning that we're doing at the region or with Metrolinx.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Okay, well, I believe that concludes this evening's presentation. So I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists as well as all of our attendees for a great conversation and some really good questions and comments. So as I said at the outset, your feedback and on our services and our projects is welcome. And as Jackie had mentioned and we had mentioned earlier, we will be posting all the questions, answers to all the questions we couldn't get through tonight on Metrolinx Engage within 14 business days. So if you did register, you will get a notification when those questions are posted. We would encourage you to register on Metrolinx Engage to be notified of our future Metrolinx events, such as Public Information Center number 4 that will be taking place this summer. You can also sign up for updates on the Durham-Scarborough BRT project by sending an email to dsbrt@metrolinx.com. Again, that's dsbrt@metrolinx.com. Thank you again for taking the time to share your feedback and for the important discussion this evening. Have a wonderful evening, and everybody stay safe.